folks, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Natasha and I do book things here. Today's video is going to be my monthly wrap-up for the month of February. I'm going to give you guys my stats as well as just talk about all the books that I've read. I do have my contemporary-a-thon wrap-up, so 6 or 7 of these books will be in that wrap-up, so please go watch that. But in the interest of time, because my wrap-ups are typically really long, I included the contemporary-a-thon books separately, but I will give you guys my star ratings for them in this video. So getting into my stats, for the month of February I read 15 books. That equals 5,409 pages. Divide that by 28 and I read 193 pages a day. That's really good for me. As I mentioned, a really good month for me is about 210 pages a day. I did get sick in the month of February. It was my birthday, and then I also had quite a few like adult business things to do, to take care of, so there were definitely a few days in there that I didn't read, but overall 15 books for the month is really good. It's like almost more than a book every 2 days, which is amazing. So my star ratings for the month are, I had 1 1-star book, I had 1 2-star book, 2 3-star books, 4 4-star books, and then 7 5-star books. I've had a lot of 5-star books in the last 2 months, but that's because I'm really being nitpicky about the books that I bring in, and I've been really selective in the books that I want to read. So then for genres, I did read mostly contemporary this month because of Contemporary-a-thon, but I did have a sci-fi, a humor, a couple horror thrillers, and a graphic novel, so that's kind of nice. Actually, I think more adult this month than YA, and then 1 children's book. Then publication date, I had 4 2018 releases. I typically try to do 3 a month, but I did have an ARC that I won from Goodreads, so that was another 2018 one. And then my oldest book is from the 1900s, or 1900 exactly. So that's over, what, 118 years old. So then I did read mostly female authors and 5 male authors. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm a little bit sick. I have bronchitis and I'm dying. And so if I'm not super clear on how I describe these books, in the words of Leslie Knope, everything hurts and I'm dying. Also, a lot of these I am going to skip over because of my contemporary-a-thon wrap-up, as I mentioned, so be sure to check out that video if you haven't already. Okay, so my 1-star book this month is The Little Old Lady Strikes Again by Katharina Engelman Sundberg. This just wasn't that good. It is translated from, I believe, Swedish, and I think the translation is a little bit off. The way that the story is told is very repetitive, like they're doing the same thing over and over again in the novel, and it gets discussed over and over again. And I'm not gonna lie, I did skim the last 200 pages of this. It just wasn't that interesting. It does follow a group of old people who are committing crimes to try to get a lot of money to help out other old folks' homes, so it's kind of like a Robin Hood, steal from the rich, help the poor kind of thing, but it just wasn't done very well, and I didn't care about the characters at all, and I think this is just gonna go back to a used bookstore. So, sorry. To have my 2-star book, and that is Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. So I ended up getting this from a thrift store. This is the very expensive hardback, which I'm happy I didn't pay too much for it, because I didn't like this really at all. This is a thriller book, so I don't want to give away too much, but it follows the story of this town where there is like a river and lake that a lot of women end up dead in. Follows multiple perspectives to find out what's happening with the ladies that are found in this river. I didn't care, so didn't find that the world building was very good at all. Realized that I'm getting very used to Stephen King's town building and world building, where he can really build a small town very well. So I expect when someone is trying to build a small town that I'm going to get that. That wasn't the case. I just didn't care about any of the characters. I struggled through this. I found out what happened and went, okay, and then I just put it down. So I at least finished it. I was invested while I read it, but I didn't like it that much, so I gave it a 2. Next are my 2 3-star books. The first one was an ARC that I did win from Goodreads. Things to Do When It's Raining by Marissa Stapley. So this is fun because this is my first ARC that I've gotten, so it says like, you know, advanced reader's copy and whatnot. This was just okay, which is typically what I rate 3 stars, is that I enjoyed them. There's nothing necessarily super wrong with the book, but they're just okay. This follows the story of two young adults as they return to their island. So this is set in Thousand Islands in the States, very close to Canada, in like Alexandria Bay and stuff like that. I've actually been there and I recognize a bunch of places mentioned in this, so I think that's really cool. So this is a contemporary that just kind of follows life and the story between these two people and how that relationship grows. It was really cute in some parts and also equally very, very frustrating in some parts. It reads very realistic, just in terms of like two adults going about their lives, coming together. So that I liked, but it just, there wasn't enough there. It just wasn't anything super, super interesting. I've read a lot of contemporaries this month where there's been that one thing that really grips me, or makes me emotional. This just didn't have it, although it was just like a nice read. This would be a good like beach read or something if you wanted. And I just gave it a 3 because I liked it, but I likely won't remember too much about it in a year's time. Sorry, book, but I give you a 3. This was one of my TBR star picks, and that is The Wizard of Oz. This is what Jeff picked for me to read. This was gifted to me by my friend Dana. So this was written in the 1900s and it definitely reads like that. This is a children's book. You guys pretty much know the story of Wizard of Oz by now. I don't really have to go into it. This is my first time actually reading the book rather than watching the movie and getting stuff from the movie. So this definitely has that children book vibe where it's much more dark than the movies are. There's a lot more like killing, and also there are some terms in this that are not appropriate now. Again, written in 1900, I can forgive it for that, but if I were to read this to my child, I would probably exclude a couple words, or just maybe explain to them that this was written in a different period, that we don't use those words now. But overall, it was cute. It was a fast read. It's nice and short, and surprisingly is still like a pretty good tale. And it was kind of fun to read, so I gave this a 3. So moving into 4-star books, the first one that I read this month is Saints and Misfits by S.K. Ali. I talk about this in my Contemporary-a-thon wrap-up. Quite enjoyed this, although I didn't enjoy it as much as some other books with similar topics, and so I ended up giving this a 4. Next, I read If You Dare by A.R. Torr. This, again, it was part of Contemporary-a-thon. This is the final book in the Deanna Madden series, where I can't really tell you too much what happened in this book because it is the final book of a trilogy. I liked it, just not as much as the other 2 books, so I ended up giving this a 4, although it did wrap up the trilogy really well. So next 4-star book is again one from Contemporary-a-thon. That is Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. This is my favorite cover of books that I bought this year. It's gorgeous. And I expected a little bit more from this, although I did really enjoy it and I gave it a 4. There's a ton of diversity in this. The main character is black, bi-romantic, and asexual, which is just amazing to read about, and I've never read about that in a book. The reason why this isn't a 5 is because this is set in like university age, although the main character was written more like she's 16. I feel like it would have worked better if everyone was aged down, and becoming sort of like a truly YA book. Or if people were sort of like more mature and aged up, it would be like a young adult, new adult kind of book. The last 4-star book that I read this month is again one of my TBR star picks. Super happy that I picked this because it was really, really interesting. Bird Box by Josh Malerman. This is a horror book and the first Josh Malerman that I've read, and now I want to read more. I am obviously a fan of horror. My Stephen King's here. But whenever I pick up something that isn't King, that's in the horror genre, that I enjoy, it's just fun, right? To find more horror that I like. This is so interesting, and I don't want to give too much away for what happened, but it's set in sort of a post-apocalyptic world where people can't see outside of their homes for fear of what's out there. And it follows a mother and her 2 kids trying to get to safety, basically. And that's all I can say without really spoiling too much more. And it was very interesting, very like riveting. I loved the lack of one sense and the other sort of making up for it, which is exactly what I thought I would like out of this book. The very sort of ending climax conflict just wasn't what I expected out of the book, and I felt like it was very rushed, so that is why I gave this a 4 and not a 5. But I would be very excited to watch the movie when this comes out. I will definitely go and see it and watch it. Well, as I was reading this, I thought, oh, this would be like such a good movie, and just different scenes in my head. And yeah, so I really like this. If you're looking for something that has like a spooky, horror-y vibe, and you like sort of adventure-y kind of horror-y vibes, this was good. Alright, so now we're getting into 5-star books, which is exciting because these are my favorite things that I've read this month. So the first one is another TBR star pick, and definitely the first book that I read this month because it was the one that I was super, super excited to read, and that is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I'm dying. We're good. We're good. Yeah, this is a sci-fi book set in space. Best way for me to describe this is like Firefly, only with more aliens and a lot more diversity. Just like the whole cast of characters are so diverse, and the way that like Becky writes about understanding diversity in different like alien races and cultures, it's beautiful because it's just like that's the kind of acceptance that we need in the world for cultures, let alone in space with alien races. I loved some of these characters. Like I just, oh man, like I need to read more. And the second I finished it, I went, I need book 2. And I know that I said I'm only going to buy 2018 releases and like stuff like that, but I think I'm going to actually spoil myself and go out and buy the second book because this was fantastic. People are not joking around when they say that this is an amazing 5-star book. I definitely love it, and this is one that I'm going to try to force Jeff to read as well. He loved Firefly and introduced me to Firefly, and I feel like he would really like this, and I kind of want to reread it again right now. So this was my first 5-star book, and a well-deserved 5-star. Oh, I did forget to mention that Things to Do When It's Raining is a February new release, and Let's Talk About Love was an end of January new release, but I didn't get it until February, so close enough. The Apocalypse of Elena Mendoza by Sean David Hutchinson. This was awesome. This was so good. I just love the way that he writes these like magical realism worlds, an everyday like world setting, but then with something just a little bit special, a little bit off, a little bit different. I'm sorry Dylan, but I like this way more than We Are the Ants, just because in We Are the Ants he bitches about his boyfriend like way too long. There wasn't any of that. Like this was all just like really excellently told. I love this. I don't even know really what to say about it because it's so weird. It follows Elena, who is a product of like a virgin birth basically. Also, she works at Starbucks and she gets talked to by things. Then a major event happens, she realized that she can perform miracles, and the book just follows that. Like I said, it's set in a world like ours, but then there's just these other different elements added in, and I am realizing that I really like that. So yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I loved it. And without too many spoilers, around the ending really made me contemplate life on Earth. So there's that, and I like it when a book can make me think and make me feel something about humanity. So yeah, I absolutely adored this, gave it 5 stars. Do recommend. Next 5-star is my Stephen King read of the month, and I'm so happy I read this and finished it. It was just it was so good. I read this in the bathtub and I just kept getting so excited to take baths, and I think I read like 300 pages of it in one night because I just was obsessed. That is Salem's Lot. It is wonderful. This is a vampire novel. That's basically it, but it is a vampire novel set in a small town, and again, the way that King writes small towns is perfect. You build this cast of characters. Some are really likable, some are like horrible, despicable people, but you get an idea and a visual of the whole town. I kept picturing in my head like where the stores were, where the houses were, like where everything was. Like you can just picture this town and the people that are in it. So that is some amazing writing in my opinion. But yeah, I will have a Stephen King Sunday all about this book where I will talk way more in detail about what it's about, but basically it is vampires in a small town and the people in the small town figuring out what to do with the vampires. It's a lot of fun, and like I said, if you like that sort of slow build town world building, it is amazing. So yeah, I absolutely love this and gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Also, I'd like to add that this is actually Nosferatu, which is kind of the style of vampire that Salem's Lot is in, especially in the movie adaptation. So this is actually Nosferatu, but for the time being it's going up in my shelf to basically be Kurt Barlow. So I feel like he is similar enough to be put with all of these guys. I do have Carrie and I have Wendy from The Shining, as well as Barb. Are 3 5-star books that I read during Contemporary-a-thon, so I'm not going to talk about them too much. First one is My Friend Dahmer by Durf Backderf. This is a stunning graphic novel all about the teenage life of Jeffrey Dahmer. He was a serial killer, did a lot of terrible things, but I like learning about serial killers' childhood development a lot. It's something that really interests me, and I loved this and found out more about his case that I didn't already know. So I gave it 5 stars and I recommend it if you're weird like me. Next one that I gave 5 stars is Little in Lion by Brandy Colbert. This was suggested to me by Chelsea and I absolutely freaking love this. This is a contemporary set in like the LA area, dealing with a teenage girl figuring out her sexuality and her relationship with her stepbrother who has bipolar disorder. It was beautiful and relatable and just wonderful. 5 out of 5. I will talk about this more in my wrap-up. Then the last 5-star book of Contemporary-a-thon is one that made me sob my face off. That is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is emotional. I just read this at the perfect time. I started it and finished it in one night in the tub. I kept filling the water up like 5 times. I just need to finish this, and I was weeping, crying. I talk more about this again in my wrap-up, but this hit me in so many ways. This follows the story of a woman about my age who has a husband. He's presumed dead. She then gets a fiance. Her husband comes back, and just sort of how she's figuring out that she has 2 true loves and what that means. And I cried my face off and I gave it a 5. So then the last 5-star book of the month is one that like hit me. This book hit me. This was a tough read but like an important read for me, and I really liked it, but was also highly, I don't want to say disturbed, but concerned, I guess, while I was reading it. And that is A Girl Like That by Tanaz Bathina. So this follows a teenage girl, Zarin, who lives in Saudi Arabia, and it's set in Saudi Arabia, which is really interesting. I haven't read a book set there before, which is really interesting, especially a YA book. So if there's more that you know of, please let me know, because I found this really interesting. And I was Googling stuff, and I'll talk about that a little more. But so this follows a teenager, Zarin, and right at the beginning of the book, you know that her and her friend are dead. It's page 1, so that is not a spoiler, but you do find out from different people's perspectives sort of what happened to lead to that and what life that she sort of lived. And she definitely is being labeled as a girl like that, which means like don't hang out and talk to a girl like that, and what that means in Saudi Arabia. And it was, and let me just tell you, this book is heavy. There's just a lot of subjects. I'm going to trigger warning, I'm just reading off of Goodreads, but trigger warnings for abuse, death, rape culture, religion, bullying, mental health, cultural norms, and things like that. And yeah, this is intense. A much needed story and a very like important look into, a glimpse into a culture that I honestly know nothing about, and now I know some more things about. So yeah, I found this really interesting. I would definitely like to know if the representation is accurate. I can't speak for that because I don't know. However, this is own voices in that the author grew up in the areas that she's mentioning, and so I'm led to believe that this is pretty accurate in that regard. Also, one thing I did not know going into this book is the glossary of words and phrases in the back. There are multiple words in Arabic, in Hindi, and other languages as well, and so I definitely was Googling stuff as I read this book before I realized that it's all in the back. So yeah, I read the whole book and I was on my phone Googling what some of these things meant. it's all in the back. So yeah, if you do choose to pick this up, which I highly suggest you do, make your life a little bit easier and refer to the glossary in the back because it explains things a lot better than Google does. It's pretty wild. I definitely had to put it down a couple moments and just go, wow, like that's a thing that happens, and okay. So I obviously gave this a 5. It was really eye-opening for me. So those are all the books that I read in the month of February. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these, if you agree on my opinions. If you don't, that's fine too. If you want to just have a conversation about these things, that's great. And so yeah, without making this too long, I do hope you guys are doing good, and until my next video, I will talk to all of you soon. Bye!